to catch on that we're streaming. Oh, that was fast. So now let's see how long it takes me to tell the world that we're streaming. Oh, I better make sure that everything else is paused. Yeah. Streaming, game dev, gonna do cables. I know cables, very exciting topic. I spent all of last week screwing around with it, trying to get it to work, and now it works. So what we're going to do is we're going to integrate it into the game properly. All right. So what we did last week was we built these cables here, these things. Excuse me. Of course, now that I've sat down to do a stream, I immediately get the hiccups. I got to figure out why that is. Today we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to integrate them in terms of visual, and then we're also going to integrate them in terms of gameplay. Now, to integrate them in terms of visual, we're going to need a plug. So that's what we're going to create now. And I sort of created one last week, and then I said, I don't need one yet. Well, now I need one. So we'll go into cables here. You know what? I don't think we're going to want to go into cables. We're going to want to delete this file. So we're just going to close that down, and we'll rename it to something else. Cables obsolete. And this is also named something dumb, but we'll go ahead and keep calling it this for now. So what we're going to want to do is create cables for the, create a plug for the cables we've created. And that's going to start as a cube like this. And we're going to want to make it quite small. So we'll just go ahead and tweak these until they fit our needs. Yoink. Something like that. I guess the depth is fine. It doesn't matter if it's too deep. And like that, like this, there we are. So this is the sort of cable plug shape that we want. And we're going to go ahead and name it cable plug. Now the problem with this cable plug is that I actually don't know whether or not it's the right size compared to the cables I'm creating, because these cables here are created in-game at runtime, and their size is kind of arbitrarily chosen, so I don't know exactly how big or how small they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, test it a whole bunch. And the way to do that is to grab the cable plug. I don't see a cable plug here. Am I blind? Cable plug, save. Oh, I named it in the wrong place. Cable plug. I named the submesh cable plug. That's obviously what I was trying to do, Blender. You got me. All right. So now, there we are, cable plug. We'll just take this out and delete the rest of that file. Yes. God. And then we'll drop that into the cable. The wind is really howling today. It's blowing like hell outside, and I have to keep going out and picking up the things when they fall over. But first, we're going to want to figure out where the heck our cable is. Where'd it go? Did I delete the wrong file? No, A-class ships is still right here. So I deleted the wrong file. I did. I'm an idiot. Wow, I need to pay attention at some point. I'm not so good at that for some reason. So here's our cable plug. We'll put it at 000 and see how the size compares. So if we take a look, you can see how it is in the wrong orientation and a couple of other details. So, no, it's the right orientation. That is correct. Good. It's just that the cables are currently too low. So we're going to go and grab the entire cable element and lift it. There we are. And you can see just how much bigger we are than the cable needs to be. So we're going to go back in here and shrink the whole thing down again on 2 axes. Now, if we take a look, that's a little too small, but not as much as you might think. So we're just going to tweak it up a little teeny bit here. And there we go. Now, if you're wondering, isn't that too small? Well, the whole point here is that these are going to actually be a little bit offset because they're currently centered around that green element. We actually want to center them like this. With that in mind, you can see how that's not too small at all. It's about the right size. But we still have to create these plug shapes, or else it'll be pretty unconvincing. So to do that, we have two options. We can either go down or we can come up. I think coming up, or those are both good options. You know what? For now, we're going to go ahead and go up, because we can always just switch that and go down. So what we're going to do that is we're going to cut it in half, and then on this side, we're going to have the plug in, the big one, and then this side will have the two smaller plugs. So we're going to want to basically just delete this side. Boom, it's gone. And what we're going to do is create this side and then clone it and shrink it. So that shouldn't be too hard, but we do have to do it. And one of the issues we're going to have is that this face is not particularly well suited to being cut. If I create a new circle, I can create one that's, say, the cables themselves are 8-sided, so let's stick to 8-sided circles. And if we shrink it down correctly, and oh, that was an interesting choice. There we are. Shrink it down correctly and bring it over properly. And we take a look. There should be a function to cut one of these by the other. You know what, though? I can't remember it. Let's go ahead and drag this up. There we are. And punch it out. And what we're going to try and do is remember how to do the projection cut, because I know that there's a way to. I just don't remember it off the top of my head. Cast? Was it cast? Add a procedural effect to the object. Cast type. No, this isn't it. So let's delete that. Well, I was going to do it in a clever way, but I can't remember how to do it the clever way, so we're not going to do it the clever way after all. Just recombine them. And what we're going to do is we're just going to delete that top face and then recreate it. Now, when we're recreating faces, we have to be a little bit careful because Unity is very bad with concave faces. So we'll have to be careful, but that's easy enough because Blender does in fact have a bridge edge loops. What the heck? Bridge edge loops, there we are. That will go ahead and have a best guess. And you can see how some of these are really terrible. Like, what the heck's up with this? Why did you decide that one was the best way to do it when it's clearly this way? But anyway, we cut it. That's about right. Let's just see whether or not that's in the right spot, because it should show up around this hole here. Oh, it's on the wrong side. So that's probably just because the cable plug is 180 off of what I want it to be. There we are. And you can see how I guessed, and I guessed right. That is almost dead center. So with that in mind, what we can do is we can duplicate this and move it off to the side and create some copies. Now, if we take a look at the cables that we're using, the large cable is 0.05, and the small cables are 0.025, so they're half the size. So all we need to do is grab this, duplicate it, move it over, except for moving it over is actually quite hard. So what we're going to do is delete that duplicator, and then we're going to just use an array and set it to have a -1 relative offset like this. Give us 3 of them, hit apply, and then we go in here and now we've got 3 of these people. The 2 over here need to be shrunk by half, so that's not hard at all. In order to have that happen, we'll just grab this, hide it, grab these, and then we will use the 3D cursor as a center point and we'll shrink on 2 axes down to 0.5. But we actually only want to shrink on that axis. There we are. And then these need to be shrunk separately on the other axis. Perfect. So now we'll unhide, and let's just see whether or not that is the right layout. If it's the right layout, then we can fill in all the various pieces that are still screwed up. So here you can see that it's a little bit too far off. These are much more centered on the object. That's not a terrible thing. We can just grab these and center them. But I think we're going to want to clean up the topology before we get too far into this, because the topology right now is garbage. So we'll just go ahead and remove doubles, and that'll weld these objects together rather nicely, and then we can close it here. What we really want to do is move these 2 circles, but we also have to move this edge or it will start to skew pretty bad. So that's what we'll do. We could really stand to hide the thing that I'm looking at here. So we don't want to scale, because if we scale, we'll end up deforming the circle, and we don't want to do that. So just do that. Now we can always move the objects here in the game world to fit. It's not that big a deal. But because they look pretty good the way they are now, it's okay if I can get them, decent. And that looks pretty decent. I guess I'm pretty happy with that. So with that in mind, we can either go up or we can go down. Let's go ahead and try going up and see how that looks. And then we'll try going down and see how that looks. I think that I'm going to like going down better, but it's hard to say. Oh. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and call that. There we are. And you can see how it's just a very, very basic pop up. Now, one of the issues we've got here is that it's not smoothed. So we'll just go into the shading, hit everything as smooth, and go over here and tell it to auto smooth with a 30-degree angle. But you can see how 30 degrees is not enough. So we're going to increase that angle until bang. And then we'll go over here and we'll see how that looks. There we are. That's a little bit better. And some of these are a little bit off, but that's okay. We can either move the piece a little bit, or we can change where it is in the game world. Either one would work. Oh, too far. All right, so if we do it like that, that's how it's going to look. Obviously, we haven't decorated the edges or anything. We don't have any UV mapping. We're still working with some pretty basic setups. But what we'll do here is, I think we're going to bevel here. And I think that the bevel will allow us to get a little bit of detail out of this. And obviously, we're going to want these to be hard edges, or else it'll look weird. So that's easy enough. And then what I'll do is I will actually add in a little loop right here, bevel it out, and then extrude it in like this. Now that's actually not centered properly because I did it wrong, so we're going to undo that. And then we're going to switch over to the 3D cursor, and then we're going to try that again. There we are, that'll do. And that we can just quickly clean up if we've done anything wrong. We didn't, so there we go. So as shapes go, this isn't a bad shape. I think that there are some things we'll want to do to make it a little bit more compelling. Let's try, so let's try beveling around the edge. I don't think this is going to work because the topology is all screwed up. Oh, it doesn't look too bad, actually. So then what we'll do is we will tell it to flatten all of those edges, or sharpen all of those edges, and we'll get ourselves a nice little bevel at the edge. And we can do the same thing here. Just grab it all and then bevel slightly, and then mark as sharp. But we don't want to mark everything as sharp. We only want to mark these edges as sharp. There we are. There we are. Now, we don't have any sort of UV unwrapping done, so we're going to want to do that. As a reminder, if you have edges that you want the UV unwrapping to cut across, it'll do it pretty good automatically if you mark them as sharp, because a sharp edge tells it that it's not going to have the same vert on both sides, because the normal has to be different, and therefore it can cut across those no problem. So that should be okay. Let's try it out. Let's just go ahead and see how it looks when we switch it over into UV mode here. I don't remember how to do this anymore. Oh, here it is. There we are. So we'll just grab this whole thing and then unwrap it smart. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then we'll just send this away. I guess we can rejoin it. So it doesn't have a material assigned to it. We'll just quickly assign it the hull material for now and save it. And we'll pop on over into Unity. And it should give us a little pattern. Oh. Well, that's not what I expected, but it's not a big deal. We can just go into the materials section and drop hull onto it. There we are. So this is not really a very good material for it, but it'll do for now. Now that's when it's going up. Let's go ahead and just see how it looks when it's going down. So let's go ahead and name this cable plug up. And then we'll duplicate it. Oh, my bad, duplicate it, and name this one cable plug down. And basically the only difference is that these pieces are just going to be in the other direction. So we'll select them like this, hit plus, and then what we're going to do is 3D cursor relative to the 3D cursor, and then we'll scale Z -1, and they will go down like so. Now in order to make this something we can sell, we're going to want to bevel these upper edges. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to select them all here. And then hit bevel. That doesn't look too bad. They don't look too badly deformed by their edges. And then once again, we can just select these pieces. We'll select there first. And we will mark it as sharp. Oh, they're already marked as sharp. I don't need to do that, so save that. So now we've got, this is going to vanish because it's no longer a mesh that exists. No biggie. We'll just grab that, switch it over to cable plug up. This is cable plug down. So when I switch it over for cable plug down, you can see how it is floating. These have to be higher as compared to the actual cables because you're going into them. So with that in mind, this is how it looks when it's cable plug down. Let's duplicate it, cable plug up. So better one, better two, better one, better two. You know what? I'll probably use both. One for outputs and one for inputs. So that's what we'll do. This will be the cable plug that we use for outputs. So this is going to be cable plug out. And we're going to drop it back down to 0, 0, 0. And then that one is going to be, and then the other one is going to be our cable plug in, which is going to be the visual here. And we'll just bring that over to 0, 0, 0, same as before. And quickly zoom in, and you can see how it's not in quite the right spot because it has to be considerably higher, or the edges of the targets have to be brought down. So we're going to grab these targets here, and we're going to drop them down like this, and that should do the trick. So now if we recreate this, that didn't work. Oh, did I move them manually? Yeah, you can see how target 1 isn't properly aligned. What we're going to need to do is take the target 1 value and actually load it in from the large path value here. So it's 0.12. So we're going to want to take all of these targets and move them 0.12 to the side. .12 plus 0.12. And the target dummy doesn't even need to exist. We'll just delete it. And now we'll try it one more time. Large path. Path find. Perfect. Small path. Path find. Perfect. So now we are able to have these cables show up however we need them to show up whenever we need them to show up. This is a very, very important thing for the programming part of this game. But the thing is, I'm not actually sure whether or not this is the right visual, and the reason for that is because we're going to have stacks of cables, so we're going to need to know how it appears when we duplicate it and have it offset. It looks like I've got the snap set pretty dang high, so we'll just manually offset it. So when I offset it by 0.25, it looks like that. I guess that's fine. The other problem is, of course, that since these are going the same place, they overlap completely. We don't have any code for that yet, and I don't know if we'll ever need code for that. For now, we'll just let it be. But I don't think we want two of these cable connectors in the scene right now because they get confusing. What we do want is to add in the code for these cable connectors that will allow us to have them explain what sort of connection this room has to other rooms. Because the big part of this is you're able to wire rooms up to other rooms. In order to do that, we got two options. One is that we can have these cable objects the thing that matters. But if we do that, then it has to grab a cable, one of these guys, and it has to find a target, which is just a transform, and then it has to interpret the transform as a room. I think it would be better if, instead of having the colliding cable as the object, we have some sort of cable wrangler class. So we're going to go ahead and just do that. Here in Crew Systems, we'll create a new C# script, which will be a cable wrangler. Actually, that sounds a little bit iffy. We're just going to call it a cable. Do we have anything else just called a flat out cable? I don't think we have anything that's just called a cable. I think all the cables have weird, overly specific names. Cable connector, colliding cable, generating cable. And then we got the generic cable. I don't like how that is, though. Maybe I should name this something else. Let's just do a quick thesaurus. Thesaurus cable. Cord link. Boom. Wire. Yeah, I think wire might be the best option here. So that's what we'll do. We'll go and replace it with wire. There we are. So this is not going to be named cable. I'm going to delete that. And we're going to go ahead and create a wire. And we're going to make sure that everybody knows that this is not a visual object. We're going to put some code, some comments in our code here. A logical object connecting one room to another generally contains a visual in the form of a generated cable. Why is this red? The global namespace already contains a wire? Fuck. I guess we'll name it cable then. Hey, would you notice that? As always, there is an update available, and there's no option to tell it to fuck off. Alright, so wire is not what we want, because apparently there's already a wire. I don't like the idea of calling it a cable, because I already have a cable. But, I guess I will. I can always rename it later, I guess. A logical cable connecting two rooms should contain visuals as a separate object, typically a generated cable of some sort. This is a really terrible naming convention, though. Oh well. So we're going to have the room that it's part of is just going to be the parent. So we're going to have a source, and that's going to be a functional room. And that's just going to be the return get component in parent functional room. There we are. And then we're going to have a public functional room target. So we've got a couple of things we can do here. Is it not in the right namespace? Hold on. Namespace crew. Namespace ship. What is the namespace for this? Namespace crew. So, oh, it's capital C. That's my bad. All right, there we go. And so for this, we're going to want to have a smaller object. So we'll just do a protected functional room target with an under. That's not what I want to do. Underscore target. And we're going to go ahead and tell it to serialize that. Sometimes I just make this public instead, you know. And then what we'll do here is get will return it, and with set, we're going to set it. But we also have to call a function, an event, that will allow us to trigger all of our contained visuals. So that's what we're going to do. And in order to do that, we have to have the ability to pass it not just the target object, but the target transform. So we're going to need a transform event, and those don't currently exist. So we'll just go ahead and create those. public transform event, a public class. Transform event descends from Unity event transform. No additional code required. Serializable. System.serializable. There we are. And then we can just go ahead and put that in as a value. So we'll put it at the top. Public transform event on target selected or set. Target changed. There we are. And then down here what we'll do is we'll call it on target change dot invoke target dot transform. And that's going to be something which allows us to regenerate it whenever we need to. And so here in start, what we're going to do is we're going to say if there is a target, then just go ahead and set it. Now what that'll do is force events. And that's a basic setup, right? So the next thing we're going to want to do is actually test that out. And the way we're going to test it out is here in this cable connector. We're going to rename this cable and drop that cable script onto it. And then the target is just going to be, you know what though? Sorry, I'm thinking about this and I don't know how to set this up because right now the rooms do not have a position for the destination objects. So right now the target core is this thing here, and when we move it, the various objects can be updated and made to go to the new destination. But the problem with that is that I don't know how to move this object to the correct position in any given room. Now one thing I can do is I can have one of these plugs in every single room, at least, you know, in terms of it being a theoretical object. So we're going to go ahead and try that out. We're going to take this target core and we are going to see what sort of visuals we get when we add it in to all of our rooms as something where, you know, you might plug things in. And the problem is that we're going to want to have inputs and outputs both as visual objects. So every room is going to need a position for cable starts and cable stops. And each of those contains 3 cable visual targets and destinations. So that's like a set of plugs. I think that the cable is going to want to have to deal with that. So this is more of a cable manager after all. So we're going to go ahead and rename it. And we'll go ahead and name it here too. So basically what we're going to need to do is have the ability to grab a set of cable visuals from inside of ourselves and set them to a destination of our choice. Now the problem is that we're going to want to have a cable manager for every single plug, and that means that some of them are going to be inputs and some of them are going to be outputs. So to manage that, what we're going to do is we're going to have a set of cables or a set of transforms for cables. So public, do we need to make it a pathfinding cable? I think we might need to make it a pathfinding cable because those have target transforms. But let's just take a quick little look here. The ordinary pathfinding... No, that's ancient. We don't need that anymore. We'll just go ahead and delete that. And here's a generated cable. This is the base, and you can see how there's no target. It doesn't figure out what a target is. So we are going to have to use the colliding cable as the only thing that's allowed. So public colliding cable, cables to generate, and then we're going to have public transform cable destinations. Before connection is made, each cable manager is either on the output or input sides. The output side is, or let's go ahead and call it control and value side. The control side generally a post has cables to generate, while the value side, generally something like an engine, has cable destinations. After they are connected, both sides will have cables. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have to create a value. This functional room target is going to have to, well, I think target's probably still the best option for that, but we're also going to want to have another way to do this, and that would be public cable manager plug. I guess once again we'll do it. I'm trying out this protected variant of what I normally do. I don't need to bother though. No, I'm not going to bother. Obviously, it's safer for you. It's better practice if you're on a team to make those protect that are private, but I'm not on a team. Public cable manager plug get return plug set. Now here is where the magic happens, because we say plug equals value, but we also need to go and activate these cables. So if so then what we're going to go ahead and say is if plug.plug does not equal this, then plug.plug equals this. And then what we're also going to say is if cables to generate dot length is greater than 0, then we're going to want to generate them. Public void generate cables. And all we need to do here is go through each of our plugs and get the corresponding other side. So for int a equals 0, a is less than plug dot, we'll just count our own stuff. A is less than cables to generate dot length, a plus plus. And here is we're also going to have an error. If not plug, then debug.log error no plug when trying to generate cables dying. Not doing it. Return. Then we're going to go ahead and say if plug dot cable destinations dot length does not equal cables to generate dot length, debug.log error plug and source have different lengths of cables, can't connect. Different numbers of cables. Bad adapter. And we'll return. All right, so now that we know we have the same setup and the right length, what we're going to do is we're going to generate them. Cables to, that's not how you spell it. Come on, cables to generate a dot, is there a target? Is there a transform? I think I can just set the transform equals plug dot cable destinations a. Cables to generate a, oh, I can't set that. That's not the right thing. So I need to get the actual cable name for this. It's other end. Okay, what a brilliant name for it. Whoever programmed that was kind of an idiot. Whatever. other end equals that. And then we just regenerate it. Find path. Path find. There we go. That should work. Now, the only problem with this is that the other side's cables aren't going to be set up. So we're not actually going to do it that way. I mean, we are. This isn't going to be that way. After they are connected, both sides will have each other as plug. There we are. So this should allow us to quickly set up cables with each other when we have compatible sources and so on and so forth. So we're just going to do that right now. Here is a plug that we can use. I don't want to change that. I want to move the whole core. This is going to have a cable element in it, which is right here. Just drop that right in here. And we're just going to drop in the targets. Cable destination. There we are. And then that's going to be fine for us, except for the fact that our target needs to be the functional room that we're in. For what we're going to do here is, what we're going to grab is, as our target, we have got two basic options. One is if we are generating both sides of the plug have... Yeah, so this is not what we want. We're going to go ahead and delete this, and we're going to get it. It's going to be return... Oh, well, I can just do it like that. Yeah, that's fine. And then we'll just have this exact same thing. Other room. And that's just going to be return plug.getComponent and parent. But we're going to go ahead and say if no plug, return null. So with that in mind, we can now get two different things, our room and other room. And that's going to work fine. This on-target change is no longer a thing we need to worry about. It is, in fact, entirely centered around the start. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if plug, then plug equals plug. That'll force the events, and it'll generate the cables, and everybody will be happy. Of course, it only happens on start, so what we're going to want to do is make this something where we can force it to happen. So we'll just do a menu item, generate cables. And then down here, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the target is correctly set up. So if plug.plug does not equal this, then plug.plug equals this. This will only happen if we're executing it through in debug menu mode. Because normally that actually happens up here in plug. So, you know, it's fine. Just pop on over here and grab our cable. This cable doesn't exist yet, does it? It does, but it's not set up. So let's set it up. We're going to go ahead and have the large path and the small path, like so. And then it doesn't have any cable destinations, but it is going to get a plug. We're going to drop in this target core as the plug. Where did I put the... Oh, I put it here. Brilliant. Drop that onto the thing that actually matters. There we are. You know what? Undo that. Because I'm going to go ahead and make this the thing that actually matters. There we go. We don't need just a random object doing nothing. So with that in mind, we'll drop the cable plug in there, and then we will tell it to run, generate cables, and you can see how now it generates them just fine. And so now what we can do is we can set up these cables to spawn whenever we need them. But the problem here, Zakiovich says, is this your job or do you work as a developer full-time as well? In my day job, I'm a database manager and developer for a green power company. I don't do game dev as anything other than a hobby, but I've been doing it as a hobby for a very long time. So I often know enough to help people out if they get lost, and it's sometimes fun to watch me screw up. So basically what we're going to want to do is have a way for rooms to have their own cable plugs. But here's the thing. The cable plugs need to be in an endless array. which means that as we need them, we're going to spawn them in. There's not going to be just one plug spot. That does, however, mean that the two kinds of plugs either have to intermix or be in separate places. If they intermix, we're going to have a lot of problems with cutting through other cables. Whereas if they're in different if they're in different locations, we have to figure out how to put them in different locations. Visually speaking, where would they go? I think that having different locations would be best. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a cable plug manager. We don't have any other option other than continuing to expand this, I'm afraid. Plug manager. And the cable manager here, we're going to go ahead and change it so that it's called a plug manager, or a plug, because it doesn't need to be called a cable manager. It needs to be called a plug. So can I change that here? I can't change it here. So just call it plug, and then we'll open it up and call it plug. 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 And then we're going to want to have a Boolean. Public bool called source. I'm calling it control. Return cables to generate dot length is greater than 0. Oh, sorry, got to be in a get. If you got any questions, go ahead and ask. I don't mind answering them. Public bool value. No, we'll just go ahead and just leave it as controlling. So with that in mind, what we can do now is we can save that cable plug as one object, which will be a cable plug value. And then I'll put that here in cables. We don't need any of these anymore. So we'll just delete all of these. Boom. I don't even think we need this guy anymore, but we will, yeah, we'll delete that too. Kaboom. And we'll drop the cable plug value in here. And then we're going to take this cable and we're going to rearrange it. We no longer need this cable target core here. And the cable plug out really should be the main object here. So we're going to drop these into the cable plug out. And then we're going to move the cable plug out, and drop the cable into the cable plug out, delete the cable. This is going to be cable plug control rather than cable plug out. And if we take a look at the plug script, put it at the top, it's still got the right cables and everything, should be fine. We don't want it to have a value, but it's not going to when we save it because that's an in-scene value. So there's no problems there. So what we're going to want to do is when we are creating a set of cables, we're going to need to offset it in a given direction by a given amount. And that's not too hard at all. So we got the plugs and then we got the plug manager. So we're going to pop this plug manager open. And we're going to go ahead and say public, that's not how you spell public, public plug, plug prefab. Public vector 3 offset per plug, and that's going to be just a vector 3 dot forward divided by 4. We can change it later, no biggie. We're not in the right namespace. Namespace crew. There we are. Wow, the wind is going. Public list plugs. So what we're going to want to be able to do is to create a new plug whenever we need a new plug. So public plug make plug. We'll just go ahead and say plug new plug equals plug.instantiate plug in ourselves, like so. And then we're going to go ahead and set that plug's position to new plug dot transform dot position equals. Now I think we can actually set the position here, but it's a little bit complicated, so we're going to go ahead and do it separately. because I don't want to have to think about quaternions. So plug.transform.position equals local position equals offset per plug times plugs.count. And then we're going to return new plug. And that should be all we need to do in order to make this work. But we are going to want to make this a debug object. So context menu, make plug. Zakievich says, as an indie developer who favors programming, would you say it'd make sense to dive into 3D modeling or find a partner? It really does depend on how good your programming is. If you're a fairly advanced programmer that can actually make stuff, then you're going to be okay looking for a team. You're going to be probably in some pretty high demand once you find some people who are willing to work with you. But a lot of programmers are just starting out, or they're overestimating themselves and they end up flaking on the first project. And here's the thing. It's much easier and more common to flake on the programming side due to technical concerns. Artists can flake for any reason they like, right? It happens all the time. But from a technical perspective, you can just make art forever. If the programming's crap, you can just keep making art. If the game's falling apart, you can just keep making art. But if you're a programmer and your software architecture is not up to par, then you're going to let that artist make art, and then you're going to say, oh, sorry, I actually can't put that in a game because I screwed up on the programming side and now the game is broken. And that's a huge letdown. So if you think you're not going to have that happen, if you're confident that you're going to be able to make a small game, then go ahead and work on a team. But if you're not competent, then you're going to want to, or you're not proven to yourself at least, you're going to want to go and either buy art assets on the store. They're pretty cheap. Some of them are free. Or you're going to want to learn how to do it yourself. You're going to want basic 3D skills either way, like learn SketchUp or something. But it's art is a big world, and so is programming. And since I'm somebody who does both, I can tell you that I am nowhere near as good as someone who just does one. Focusing really does help a lot, but you have to be pretty good already in order to get that, the other people on your team. All right, so let's see if this works. So in order to have this happen, we are going to need to create an object on the room and have it be a place where these things get created and moved. So here's a room. Peter Nerlich came by. Hello. Create a new empty object here. I'm going to just move it up. So one of the things we're going to want to do is actually have this plug manager have a visual so that we can see where the heck it is. Public, what can you call it? Gizmos, on draw void, on draw gizmos. I don't think it needs to be public. I think it can be protected or even private. So what we're going to want to do here is just draw a box around us. So gizmos.draw wire cube, transform.position plus vector3 dot forward. No, we're just going to go ahead and make it this vector transform.position and vector3 dot 1 divided by 4. Very, very basic setup here. And you can see that now we have an idea of where this object is without having to have a visual attached to it. Now the problem with this is that it's a little hard to tell where the center is, so I was going to like offset it and stuff like that. But if I was going to do that, I might as well do like a full-fledged draw program. So what we've got here is something where it's going to be moving in Z space. So if we do grab that plug prefab, so cable plug control, drop it in, and we tell it to make the plugs, you can see how it makes the plugs and then it's moving them. Oh, I forgot to add the plugs, so hold on. Plugs.add new plug. So let's delete those two plugs. Try again. Make plug, and then make plug, and then make plug. And you can see how that looks. That should be fine if our orientation is correct. Right now, what we've got is an orientation where it moves along the z-axis and it's pointed up the y-axis, and that's fine. I can live with that. All we've got to do is make sure that our visuals work. You can see that the containers for the cables, they all contain values already. So we're going to want to go in there into the cables within these and delete these chain lengths here. You know what? I actually am not sure that's true. Let's just shorten them to 5. There. So we'll still have an indication as to what's going on, but we won't have to see them, you know, in specific. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and clear them. Now we don't have a current clear function, so we're just going to add it in. Public void clear for each. So we're going to want to do 2 things. If it's running, we're going to want to delete them using the standard destroy, and if it's not running, we're going to want to use destroy immediate. So if application.running is running, playing, there it is. For each plug in plugs, destroy plug.gameObject, else, oh, we're going to want to remove it, plugs.clear. Otherwise, we're going to want to do it a different way, which is while plugs.count is greater than 0, destroy immediate plugs 0, plugs.remove at 0. And then obviously that's going to be something that we want to make context. Zakayovich says that he's a computer science student in Denmark. Not really sure what you mean by architecture. Have you got any resources where I should look up that more deeply, or should I pursue a higher degree? So you don't need to pursue a higher degree to learn about software architecture, but you do need to learn about software architecture. And if that hasn't been one of the things that you've been learning in college, your college is not very good at computers. Software architecture is the art of making sure that you can actually finish making your program and continue to maintain it. You can always get started on a project, but if you've ever tried to do that and found that you've been getting bogged down, you can't figure out how to implement something because it conflicts with something else you've created and so on and so forth, you're going to run into what's called technical debt. That's what that is. And software architecture is making sure that you can always get to the end of your project. You always know how to implement something so that it won't interfere with what you've got to do later, and how to make sure that there's enough flex so that if your requirements change, you can still make it work. And in game dev, that's incredibly important. It's probably the most important skill for a programmer in game dev, because you can go ahead and look for anything you'd like online. You can find out how to use GPU instancing or anything like that with just a Google search, but you can't figure out how to actually assemble your game into parts that won't constantly break. I've got a few videos about that sort of thing on my channel, but that's really just like a very, very basic sort of teaser sort of thing. If you want to learn more about software architecture, just look up software architecture. It's an industry term, so you can go ahead and just search at Google for that. The only issue you're going to run into is if you're games focused. Most software architecture is for business applications, not for games. You'll still learn a lot, but you need to understand that games are a densely interconnected web of modules. Business architecture can get away with a lot of pseudo-stateless stuff where you don't have to always know what's going on all the time. But with games, the control system is really complicated. And there's things like, well, are we in a modular menu right now or a non-modular menu? And stuff like that starts to matter. So you should go ahead and read up on software architecture, but keep an eye out for the difference between games as software architecture and business software architecture, because they're kind of different beasts. And in case you couldn't tell, I was waving my hands around, which is why I didn't actually do anything while I was saying that stuff. So I think that what we're going to want to do here is clear these plugs. It didn't work. Well, it got rid of the plugs, but didn't clear them. I bet. .game object, because obviously I want to destroy the object, not the sub-object. So if you're really not familiar with software architecture at all, I don't recommend you start with Unity. I recommend that you start with something that provides a lot of architecture for you to get started on. If you don't mind the fact that nobody will play your game, then I recommend RPG Maker. It has a very, very strong architecture already in place, and you can just play around with learning how games flow, but no one will play it, because right now RPG Maker is incredibly unpopular. But if you want to have something that's a little bit more difficult to learn on, but still someone will play your game eventually, you can use Game Maker, something like that. Those are usually very good, but you will have to struggle a little bit with the architecture and try and figure out how it all flows. Yeah, that's how I like to see it. That's pretty good. Let's go ahead and revamp the visual so that I can actually make sense of it. What we're going to do is we are going to make it so that this offset per plug is a float. And we're just going to set it to 0.25. Because that way we'll be able to do some values here. There we are. We won't have to do anything complicated. Steel seems to like that answer as well. Yeah, M. Corrales says, RPG Maker gives him ticks. Yeah, RPG Maker is extraordinarily unpopular, but it is an incredibly easy place to learn how to put together a game. Because everything is right there. You just slot it together and you say, oh, so that's how I might be able to build it on my own. Oh, so this is the constraint that they have and that's why they have it. It's really a great learning tool. And you can make pretty good games in it. You just have to be really aggressive about replacing the stock parts so that it feels good. But these sorts of things come and go in waves. RPG Maker is unpopular because a lot of things got made in RPG Maker. Recently, Ren'Py started releasing new versions again, so I think we're probably going to see a couple thousand games coming out in Ren'Py in the next few years, at which point Ren'Py will be the super unpopular thing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get a matrix 4x4, and we're going to go ahead and save it so that we can revert correctly. And then we're going to set the matrix of the gizmos to our matrix so that we can set things up without having to do a whole bunch of weird offsets. So gizmos.matrix equals transform dot matrix 4x4. I believe it's world to local, or is it local to world? I think it's world to local. We'll know for sure in the near future here. So what we're going to do is, with that out of the way, we no longer have to use transform.position. We can just put it at 0. We don't want to put it at 0, though. We want to put it just a little bit down. So vector3.up times 0.25f. And then here we're going to divide that by 2. And let's just make sure that we have the correct transform here. I forgot to set it back at the end, didn't I? We do not have the correct transform, I don't think. No, it doesn't look like we do. So that's fine. We're going to want to revert it back here. Gizmos.matrix equals old. And then I think this is just going to be local to world. I don't know why I can never remember that ever. You think that I'd remember it. M. Corrales says Unity has the same problem. I mean, sure. The difference between something like Unity and something like RPG Maker is that RPG Maker really does have a straitjacket. Unity, you can put out bad games all day and night by grabbing some asset store game platform and then pretending it's your game. But with RPG Maker, it's actually quite difficult to not make the standard JRPG. It's built with one idea in mind. So while Unity might have a lot of random people who don't like it because they don't understand how Unity works, RPG Maker has a lot of people who don't like it because they've played too many RPG Maker games. You can't really say you've played too many Unity games because there's no such thing as a Unity game. There's a Unity common aesthetic, and there's a Unity probably not very well done, but there's not really a Unity style of game. Mifaz says he was interested in studying game architecture, and he stumbled upon the HPL engine, and it helped him a lot. Yeah, definitely study anything you can find. And Zakevich tells me to get back to work and stop waving my hands, which is exactly what I was doing. Yeah. So what we're going to want here is 0.25, 0.25, 0.5f. Oh, so far 0.5f, 0.25f, 0.25f, and this is going to be vector 3.down. There we go. And that should be exactly the right size and inside of the terrain. There we are. It's too far inside the terrain. So is it, or is it right on? Let's see here. No, we're using, yes, that's correct. We're going to want to drop this down a little bit less. There we are, because I believe that is actually zero there. Yeah, I'm 99% sure. So that's how we're going to draw it, but we're going to want to also draw a secondary cube to show where the next one will be. And to do that, we're just going to make it smaller. So now we should have a little narrower box right here. Yeah, there we are. Perfect. And then I guess we're just going to do that one more time. That way I won't have to continually recreate these plugs to make sure that they're in the right spot. So yeah, if you want to pick apart a game engine, there are only a couple that you can really pick apart, and that's certainly one of them, the HPL engine. I'm not sure that that's how I would want to start learning game architecture, unless you are like a real code junkie. I think I would like to start by looking at the concepts rather than the implementations. So here we've got a plug manager, and these are the out plugs, so control plugs. And so you can see where they're going to fit based on where they are. Here's the only problem. This room isn't a place that has control plugs, so we're not going to want it here. We're going to just drop this onto a room that actually has control plugs, like the bridge. Here we are. And then we'll move it to somewhere on the bridge and set it up. Where the heck is it? Oh, I shrunk it. So once again, there are two pieces to this puzzle. There are the out plugs and the in plugs, the control plugs and the value plugs. So these are the control plugs, and we're also going to want the value plugs. And I think what we'll do is we'll just set them up on opposite sides, just like this. So duplicate this, flip it around, move it across, and set it up with the other kind of plug. And then generate the plugs and see what happens. Make plug. There's a plug in the way. Let's grab it and move it out of the way. And you can see how this plug is not offset correctly. It's at 0, 0, 0, and what we really want it to be at is like, oh, it's even backwards. So this needs to be set up with the correct set of offsets, which is about that. So let's go ahead and save that. So we can't save that, so we'll just go ahead and do it the exact same way here. So this is 0, and this is 0.15 only. But the problem is, I don't believe that those values get saved. So if I were to do that again, make plug, you can see how they're not saved. So we're going to want to tell it to save the world position or the local position when we spawn it. Greenie says, ahoy there, fellow Unityer. Hello. And Mifaz says, well, architecture designs were too abstract for him. Yeah, that's always going to be the issue. Are you learning something that is too fluffy and you won't be able to apply it? Or are you struggling through so much concrete that you can't see how it's actually assembled? Finding the sweet spot is going to be different for everybody. If deassembling an engine and looking at all the code works for you, then that's what you should do. But I can't say it'll work for everybody. So here is where we instantiate the plug, and we're just going to tell it to keep... see, here's the thing. This isn't actually what I want. Did they change this value? Because what I want to do is keep the original position of the object, not in world space, but in local space. And I honestly don't know whether or not that's what that does anymore. Let's find out. It shouldn't be too hard. Just grab this and make the plug. See, it didn't work at all. Oh, wait. It kept the rotation correctly. Oh, but I'm setting the position. I see. So when I actually set the position, what I want to do is... You know what? I should just put this plug inside. Well, no, if I do that, then it's... so this plug might be better off if I were to make the interior object. Yeah, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this plug here and drop it off to the side. Just somewhere random here, down at the bottom. And this is going to be changed into a different set of visuals. So what we're going to want to do is create an empty object, drop it outside here, and then drop the cable plug inside of it. And then what we can do is this plug will have the value related to that. So this will be 0, 0, 0, 0, or whatever it happens to be, right? And then we'll call this the cable plug value. And then we'll overwrite this. Oh. And then I'm just going to see how that looks, and then we'll move it, and then we'll be done. So over here, we've got the setup. Let's see whether or not it's broken or working. So plug prefab is missing. That's fine. Just drop it in. Oh, my bad. We've actually got to move the plug to the non-visual part. So just go over here, grab it, and drop it into the new area, like so. Easy as pie. As long as we've still got the 2 cable destinations, it's all golden. So drop that plug into the plug, and then run it one more time. Make plug. Okay, so you can see that it's all rotated incorrectly. So that's not a big deal. We can just go rotate it correctly now. And what we're going to want to do is actually set this to null, or the default, because it's not doing what we need to do. So there's no reason to make it complicated. So we're just going to rotate like this, and then move it up 0.125 or 0.15. Clean up some floating point errors, hit apply, and then we'll go back over into the object in question and make sure that worked. So we'll just delete this and try again. Perfect. All right. So now we've got 2 cable plug elements, one for values and one for controls. So with that in mind, we can now make as many plugs as we need on the fly as the player starts to plug things in. And we can connect them with whatever ports on the other side that we want to connect with. So for example, in this case, we've sort of virtually got it connected to a plug, but that's an illusion. Let's go ahead and connect it to a plug properly. So if we take a look here, what have we got? This is not part of the actual main object, so we can delete it. This is the object in question, the plug manager control. We can make a plug, and then we can drop one of these plugs into the... We have to select it first, obviously. There we are. Drop this into the plug, and then fire it off. And there we go. So as you can see, these are backwards, and therefore they flip. That's not going to work. So it's just because they are currently inverted. Am I going to want to make that something that works? Trying to figure out the best way to do this. Because I want to be able to flip it either way and have it correctly align. I think I'm going to need to have a rotation specification here. So the core issue is that we are actually creating 2 cables, even though we're showing 3 cables. But what that means is that the third cable is an illusion, and basically it doesn't actually exist. So it's always going to be offset by the same amount as wherever it was created, which means that all of our setups have to be correctly oriented. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in an orientation. Public float rotate around z equals 0. And then we'll just do that down here. When we create this, we'll say new plug dot transform dot rotate, and then we will set it up with a specific one. There it is. Sorry, I'm trying to think about. I think I want it to be vector 3 dot up, just because this always happens when the ship is in dry dock and it's not rotated at all, so it should be fine. We can just make it local to the object, yeah. So space dot self, and that's going to be that amount of degrees. So rotate around z. Although I called it rotate around z, it's clearly rotate around y. There we are. Now there is now a new plug.transform.set position end rotation here. But here's the thing, you have to actually pass it a quaternion. So I'm not going to try that. I'm not going to do that. We're going to do it the easy way. All right, so that's a Blender file. Close that, don't need that. Here we are. So this down here, what we're going to do is we are going to make this have a rotation of 180. And then we're just going to see whether or not that works. So we generate a new plug here. And you can see how now it's rotated the other way. So we'll clear, create a new plug. And then once again, we will set this plug up to take this plug. And regenerate. There we go. So we still have some issues. One of these issues is that it is not doing any sort of blending. The other issue is that since it's going forward rather than backwards, it got confused and it's got a curly Q. I think that I need to have a better way to fix the curly Q, but I also think that it's probably worth putting the blending back in. I disabled it because I was having problems and I wanted to take a screenshot. So we'll pop up this colliding cable and we will put in the blending so it doesn't make 90-degree turns as much. Basically what happens is when we are creating this, we get this ideal. We're getting an ideal that is either directly towards the target object or along a specific axis. And then what we want is a real delta that is not so sudden. But here's the problem. It is only fires if it's greater than or equal to 0. And I think that what we've got here is a situation where it's like negative 0.0001. Now the reason it only fires if it's greater than 0 is so that we don't accidentally try and turn directly around, which will never actually work and it'll just constantly get recorrected and we won't actually go anywhere. So I think that that'll work. So I do have the correct setup. It's just that for some reason it's not firing. There we are. So that's more like how it's supposed to be, but you can see how it still got some spinning. That's because the up vector is wrong. I really need to create an up vector that works. And I've been thinking about how to do it, and I think that the best way to do it is to find the center point. And the up vector can always be just directly away from the center point. And that should work. Let's try it out. So the chain isn't the problem. When we're creating the chain here in Pathfind, that part works fine. The problem is when we actually make the chain. we end up making it with an up that is screwy. And the up is right here. So what we're going to want to do is have an up that we can constantly re-find that will not spin. And this is something where it shouldn't be too hard. So we're going to go ahead and just start it up here. So if we take a look at the chain count, we can get the first and the last point in the chain and find the point between them. Vector 3 center point equals chain 0 plus chain dot count minus 1. And we can just divide that by 2. And that'll be the center point. So when we're finding the up direction here, we're going to want the up to be, up is directly away from center point, but flattened onto the plane of our direction of travel, i.e. the normal. So here you can see how we're already doing it somewhat, but what we really need to do is just take all that crap out. So vector 3 dot project on plane, chain delta, except for it's not the chain delta, it is the difference between where we are now and the center point. So that would be chain A minus center point, and then normal. That's project on plan, which isn't going to work. Yeah. Just delete this. There we go. Grind, 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 and there we are. Let's try it on. Perfect. What did I tell you? You got to just know how this stuff works, and then you'll know how it works, and it'll work. Sounds easy, but you'd be surprised. All right, so now it's all working. We have some very nice little plugs set up. It's all flying past at the speed of sound. We're coming towards the end of the mission, or end of today's stream. I think I probably got about 20 minutes left, because I'm going to just quickly create a test and then put in the control system. So in order to have the control system, all I've got to do is take this object down here, the plug manager. We're going to drop these plug managers in as prefabs, and then we're going to put them on a couple of other rooms. So the plug manager control for this room does have to have a plug in it, but then we're going to just go over here to one of the other targets, like say this engine room. Grind, grind, grind. Where is the ship? There's the engine. There's the duty room. We're going to drop the plug manager value here inside of the duty room. And you can see how it's kind of floating in a strange place. That's fine. We're just going to move it until it fits into... that's not quite square. There we are. We're just going to move it until it fits into what we're trying to accomplish, which is that. And now, if we go over to it, we can fire it up like this. And so, what we can do now is we can connect those two plugs. So this plug and the other plug here. Drop. Bang. Like so. And then we'll just go ahead and generate that. There we go. Perfect. And you can see how they're now connected. And if we take a look at the plug over here, you can see how it says what the plug is. They're all perfectly connected. Both sides know what the other side is. It works fine. The plug materials might need to be changed. So let's just quickly change the plug material from a hull into something else like deco. Is this deco not textured? I don't think this deco is textured. Oh, it is. It's just dark blue for some reason. I guess that's fine. We're just going to make it stick out a little bit so I don't feel quite so silly. It looks like this is inside of the bounding box of the object, so it's not firing properly. No biggie. There we go. So now we can actually see them. But I think I'm going to go ahead and just move it up a little bit because I think it's a little bit too low for my preference. There we are. And then we'll just refire it. No, not make plug. Generate kibbles. There we are. So now the question becomes, what sort of connection do we have? Well, over here in the post, whoop, what we've got is the situation where we're looking for all of the duties and stuff that we can have. And in order to do that, what we do is we go and grab all of the duties in every single room. But that's not what we want to do, because that's all of the duties all across the ship. If we have a plug that's connected specifically to another functional room, that's the only place we want to look for duties. So that's what we're going to do right now. And to do that, all we have to do is put in an if statement. So I guess we'll just go ahead and make it a value here. Public plug manager output, or control plugs. And we're gonna have to set that up, I think, because if we have input plugs and control plugs, value plugs and control plugs, we're going to need to have those both set up. I can't randomly tell which is which. I can, but it's a lot of extra work. So we'll just call it plugs control and plugs value. And then down here, we're going to go ahead and say if there is a plugs control, if plugs control. Then what we're going to want to do is grab all valid targets. So here you can see how it gets this is just duties like this. What we're going to do is we're actually going to override that. So delete that. We don't need it. We're going to go over into duties, which is defined somewhere else. There it is. Here it is, but it's a virtual, so we can override it from our functional room. So let's just grab this, put it in our post. I guess we'll put it above. And then we'll just go ahead and override. And then what we're going to do is we are going to check and see whether we have a plugs control and if we're connected to anything. So if plugs control, if not plugs control, then return base.duties. Is it not base. There it is, base.duties. And then we're going to go ahead and say if plugs control dot plugs dot count equals 0, then do the same thing. So I guess it can just be one if statement. There we are. So now we have output plugs, our control plugs. Only search those facilities. So here's the question. Are the control plugs below the duty or above the duty? And that's something that's a little bit difficult to guess. So we have to come up with it. We have to decide. So here you can see in the engine, they're actually below the duty. They'll never be above the duty because that would imply that the duty is a subset of the plug manager. It's inside the plug manager. That wouldn't make any sense. So we're always going to have the plug manager inside the duty. There's really no other option, I think. Because the only other thing we could do is we could get the functional room and then get... No. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go up, grab the functional room above us, and then find the duties within the functional room. Okay, we'll do that. I'm second guessing myself. I think that that's okay. The problem is we're currently editing a functional room, and the functional rooms have a duty class, our duty thing here. You get all of these duties, but the functional room has duties separate from local duties. Here it is. So this is what we'll end up doing. We'll end up just getting the local duties of it. So that should work fine. Yeah, that'll be great. Let's try it out. So duties, list duty, or first we'll just find the functional rooms. List functional rooms equals new list. And it's going to look a lot like the old code, because basically all we're doing is not getting the attached rooms. We're going to load them up in another way. So we're just going to get these rooms based on the number of plugs. So for each plug in plugs control dot plugs rooms dot add plug dot functional room. And you might be saying it doesn't have a functional room. It actually does, but we're not calling it that. We're calling it something else. We're calling it our room. That's fine. I can call it that. And that's the right setup. It's almost the exact same piece of code. All we do is that instead of getting every room on the ship, we only get the ones that we're plugged into. So with that in mind, we're going to just recompile everything. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we are going to test and see whether that works. So basically what we've got here is this room is not going to work out for us. We're going to drop the ops room outside of the ship for the moment. It's just not going to be useful for this debugging. And instead we're going to drag this back until it properly connects like that. And then we're going to hit play, and all we should get are pilots and engines. No attempts to process any sort of power. I think this is the first time I've hit play today. Look at that. Oh, nope, there they are. Still processing the starboard. So there's still something going on, and also we're running really much too fast now. Let's back this off to 1. So for some reason it's not working quite right, and I'm not sure why. Let's go ahead and just see whether this is actually firing. Debug.log name plus has restricted duties based on cables. Oh, there's the problem. It's not our room, it's the other side that matters. There we go. That'll probably work. One more time. Process engine. Good. Now we shouldn't see any other options, just those two over and over. There we go. Nope, nope, still erroring. What the heck's going on? Where is it getting the process starboard? So if we take a look, I didn't actually, we're going to just go ahead and actually look for that debug. So it should tell us immediately. Oh, well, maybe that's the problem. It might be that I have to tell the ship to recompile, but I was pretty sure that I fixed that and didn't need it anymore. We'll go ahead and hit play and see what happens here. What's going on? So I think the problem is that there is no start door. Initialize from ship door start door. And it's not telling it, it's saying that there's no start door. I know what the problem is. So what we're going to do is we're just going to grab a start door if we don't have one. So the problem is that it's not actually calculating anything properly. It's just erroring out and defaulting. So start door. If there is no start door, then start door equals doors equals... Oh, we can't do that here because we don't know what room we're part of. So we're going to have to actually find where this is being called from. That's the definition. I want to find a place where it's being called from. There it is. So that's definitely calling it with the doors. Now, I can't imagine that this is the issue, but I want to track this issue down, and it's always fun to watch someone struggle and try and figure out what's going on in the last 10 seconds of their video, or last 20 minutes or whatever. So you can see that this isn't what's causing the error. It may be that that is not the problem at all, and that I've misunderstood what's actually causing it to barf. Maybe that there's no start element. Maybe that there's no map. Let's try and find out here. Debug.log start element. Debug.log start element.map. Um, what? All of a sudden it's... What's going on? Did I accidentally delete something? What? What the fuck? It's not even opening with the correct... Whoa, I'm not sure what's going on here. That was super weird. Alright, well, let's try it again. Alright, so what we've got here is a whole bunch of things that work fine, and then it ends with a null. So it says that the S-ops chamber, null. So that's correct. The S-ops chamber is, in fact, a big fat null. Is that really the issue? Just that I forgot that they're not in a ship sometimes? Yeah. So I think it's not going to fix the issue, though. I think we're still going to get it. Yeah. Still processing the solar power, even though it shouldn't anymore. So there's still an issue here. You can see how it's not actually doing the post-checking that it's supposed to be doing. Maybe that's because I barfed it here. Local tasks, functional room app. Why are you all red? You should be fine. There's nothing wrong with any of you. It's just an error left over from back when functional room garbaged out. Alright, so basically we never got this message. So we're going to go ahead and make that an error so that we can see it. And we're going to hit play again and we're never going to see it. It's just going to not run at all. Yeah, you can see how there's nothing there. No errors. So that's not actually running at any point. So that's the problem. This is never getting called. Now the question is, it's out. So here is my expert advice. Plug shit in. Idiot. What a maroon. Oh, it's not a post. Okay, that's fine. So now maybe it'll work. Oh, you know what? It might not even let us pilot anymore. I may have overridden the fact that it can look at its own... Yeah, it can't even look at its own duties anymore. That's a little too strict. Let's go ahead and add ourselves to the list so that we can look at our own duties as well. Rooms.add this. So now it should get piloting and the engine, and that's it. We shouldn't get any more of those solar panel elements. Yeah, that's what I wanted it to be like. All right, so this stream is basically over. I'm just going to take a screenshot or two and call it a day. If you have any questions, this is the last seconds that you can ask them in. And I'm going to go ahead and... The only problem is we've got this thing looping over and over and over, but that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and just take a screenshot. And just... post a screenshot. created cable managers so players can link any number of things together. This changes how the rooms work and is a core part of the programming on the sly ideal game dev. And we're also just going to take a quick little picture of the other side. It's got a sun in it for reasons unknown to me. We'll go ahead and grab that sun and make it go away for a minute. There you are. Just leave. No, that's scaling. Leave. Just get out of the way. And screenshot Saturday. Or is it Saturday screenshot? I can never remember. Apparently, it's no longer even something that anybody does because it's not even autofilling it anymore. Oh well. Good enough. And I believe that's it for today. Oh, and Mifaz then pops in and says, what is this game about? So this is a game where you don't get to build the whole ship. So you take chunks of ships. They're called space frames. This is a space frame. And it's got all the high-powered systems attached, like engines and, you know, solar power stuff and hangar bays and stuff like that. And what you do is you build the crew part. And it is a lot of fun in theory because you're managing the crew and you're choosing who you want to be on the crew and you're sending them off on missions and watching that stuff unfold. But as you go through, you quickly start to learn that it's actually a programming game because the way you arrange your crew area is very, very similar to how you would learn to program. There are things that happen first, there are if statements and stuff like that, but it's all done without any feeling of actually programming anything. It's just how things are arranged. That's why earlier you saw me move that operations room out of the way, because if the operations room was where it was, it would have actually interfered with this because it had priority. And so the basic idea is I'm trying to make a game which is about people on spaceships, and it's also a programming game. The people part isn't quite done yet. I need to have the programming part ready first, and then we'll move the people in. And that is the idea, and it's still quite a ways away from being finished. I only got started a little while ago, so, you know, lots of effort left to put in before we are ready to see it released. I haven't even gotten any of the construction part in yet. Right now it's just I can do it here in scene view, but if I tried to release it into the world, there's no interface for clicking on stuff and making stuff happen, so, you know, it's all logic and no interface. That's it, and thanks for stopping by. I'll see you on Wednesday if you want to stop in on Wednesday, otherwise maybe next Saturday. Mifaz says it sounds ambitious. It's not as ambitious as it sounds. It's basically just a city building game or a shipbuilding game, really cut down, but with a very different focus. See you around.